Name and address, please.
Phil Winardo, 4440 North Tropical Trail, Merritt Island.
Great.
I'm a longtime resident of North Merritt Island, and I'm also a board member of the North Merritt Island Homeowners Association. I'll try to keep it kind of short, but I disagree with dissolving the North Merritt Island Dependent Special District. And there are two primary reasons for that. First of all, and I think I want to preface that too, I've been very pleased so far with the level of interest that our new county commissioner, Mr. Lober, has taken in issues affecting North Merritt Island. I think he's been to almost every HOA meeting we've had since even before he was elected, except for maybe last night. But other than that, he's taken quite an interest. But with that said, my first issue is I believe that the Board of County Commissioners overall has made several decisions in the recent past that have not been in the best interests of residents of North Merritt Island. And as examples, there's approving increased density, cruise ship parking, things that have added to already existing traffic problems, already existing flooding problems. There was an attempt about a year ago to use North Merritt Island as a dumping ground for toxic muck from the Indian River Lagoon. And those are only a few examples. But my other primary concern is there are numerous infrastructure problems on North Merritt Island that are either not being addressed or are being addressed very slowly. And just as one example, we have one fire station, and it's in such a state of disrepair that the firemen have to sleep in an RV that's parked in the parking lot. And it's because the building is not habitable where they would otherwise sleep. And it's been like that for some time, and I don't know of any plans to correct that. And I've even heard that it's possible they may want to close that fire station. So, as a resident of North Merritt Island, I think all of us rely on the Dependent Special District Board to be our voice and another level of representation to you guys. And I don't want to see that go away, and I strongly disagree with dissolving the North Merritt Island Dependent Special District Board. I can't speak for Port St. John, but that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hugh? And after Hugh Bynes, John Shanson?
Hello, Hugh Bynes, 1870 D Drive, North Merritt Island. Just got this email just a little bit ago, and I guess really all I can do is read it. I strongly object to District 3 proposal to they're going to disband the Dependent Special District Board. That's like our boots on the ground. They let us, the citizens, let them know what the issues are and then address it to you, which I think helps. And you try to get rid of the government, but you know this is a free volunteer army, really. You know, so the email I got was to. It said our board is the only government that North Merritt Island has, and we're being unincorporated, where citizens can voice their opinions about rezoning requests in these areas. These boards then report the recommendation of the citizens to the commissioners regarding the wishes of local citizens. And the commissioner from Palm Bay wants these boards done away with. If you still want representation, the board is staffed by local volunteers with term limits whom we elect, a process in place for over 2 decades. And I guess it brings to the point of our nation's capital. They have the license plate that says taxation without representation. You know, so that's the way we're going to feel if we have no representation by having one more level of volunteer government, essentially, you know, to give you more knowledge of what's going on. Because it's a unique situation. Like he was talking about the fine, where the Florida Inland Navigation, They're dumping all that muck in there, the Kennedy Space Center. I mean, they're slowly changing the 5 acre down to 2 acre, rezoning, trying to pack more people in there. Well, we're not more the intense drivers like they have down in Palm Bay, no offense. But, we're kind of a mellow area, and it's what do you got, the wildlife, you got the Space Center, you got very much flooding when, then they did the PICA, the Pond Island Conservation Area, for flooding, and we've probably had the worst flooding we've ever had in my 25 years there. But, it's hell, because every acre of land that you concrete over and put the roofing on the housing, well, now you're not going to percolate the water in the soil and the thousands of gallons extra going to streams, and we're on the very backside of the conservation area, and our water level never been higher. So we have the straight canal system right into the big lake, 900 acre, the Pond Island Conservation Area. So, I mean, I just feel more density will definitely, I feel like Palm Bay is pretty much overpopulated right now. We don't need that up there. But anyway, that's my point, and I appreciate your consideration to shoot it down. Thanks.
Thank you. John Shanson, after John, Mary Herberg.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. I am John Shanson. I live at 7105 Briar Oak Drive, Merritt Island. The Special District Board is democracy in action. It's home rule. It was established by referendum, and annually, it is through the election cycle, its board members are elected and they are not paid. They are volunteers. I know that the destitute developers want one less step to pave over our community. And as one of my neighbors say, he says, follow the money. Those destitute developers are probably very generous contributors to election campaigns, whereas the homeowners who are less likely to have an extra dollar or two only have their word and their vote. And they use that vote to build that board and fill that board. Merritt Island is a cash cow for Brevard County. Just as it was saying, the fire station out there, we pay our fire fees, and we got the smallest station in the county, and it's in bad shape. I appreciate you not supporting this question.
Thank you.
That's a quick question, Mike.
Sure.
Staff. Just a question for staff, actually, because I don't know how the various fire stations compare to one another. Maybe Matt, I don't know if this is best for you, or could you give me a little rundown on, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, in terms of whether that is in fact the smallest, because I don't know whether it's the smallest or not, and if you want to address as well what the prior speaker had mentioned about the building not being habitable.
Yeah, well, I can address that. I'm not sure what station he's talking about, but we just got done rehabbing completely during the last year a station and that had mold and other issues. So, and I was speaking to Matt right before this item to confirm that. So I don't know if he's speaking about the same station, but I believe he might be in that. Excuse me?
Was it north of the barge canal?
Yes, good evening, Commissioner. Yes, sir. It was
Thank you,
North Marinite Station. We
Thank you.
were literally just re-entered into it about a month ago after complete renovation.
I appreciate that. If it's all right, I'd like to have a longer conversation with you after this, or at another day, perhaps this week at your convenience.
Yes, sir. No
Thank
problem.
you.
Right. Mary? And after Mary, Jack Ratterman?
Good afternoon. Mary Hilberg, 3780 Sierra Drive in Merritt Island, North Merritt Island. And I'm also the chair of the Special Advisory Board for North Merritt Island, and I have been for several years. North Merritt Island started this. We initiated it, and we worked to have this happen, to have this be ours. We followed the plan of the Port St. John one. They're the ones that did it originally. And because they felt that their voice wasn't being heard, they felt that they were a unique community and the rest of the area was being paid attention to, and they were kind of like stepchildren. So that's kind of why they did it. And in the same light is the reason that Merritt Island is. North Merritt Island is a unique, very challenging area. And as Mr. Denninghoff can tell you, with all the stormwater systems, and all our staff can tell you that Virginia and the rest of them, all the stormwater plans and the pumping and the ideas and the redesigning, and it's very expensive just to keep us out of water. We have a lot of challenges, and the people there feel that they need to have somebody like on their side, even though I know that we have our own commissioner. It's a large district, a large precinct, and for them to come up here and speak each time for everything is difficult. Also, with the challenges that we're having now with the ADA and so forth, a lot of the information isn't even moving, and most people aren't even aware that we're having this discussion tonight. So we would hope that the board would consider the aspects of the community's need. It doesn't cost anything. We volunteer. We're elected by our community members, our neighbors. We work hard. We study. We look onto the internet for information. And nothing is it really, I don't know what the exact intent is, other than, like Commissioner Tobias says, shrinking the government. Well, we can shrink it just so much, but this is, you're our employees. We don't want you to shrink. We want you to stay where you are. We want you to stay so that we can use the things that we need. We want you to help us. We don't want you to shrink so small that we can't see you and get to you and to reach you any longer. So this is not something that is, I think, at least in the opinion of myself and the board, an issue that is really a big ticket issue. This is a community of volunteers that are trying to help, and we pass on our advice. We used to pass it to you directly, and now I'm hurrying. And now, instead of the elected board going to the elected board, we go to the appointed board that comes to recommend to you to the elected board. So we've already moved over, but we'd like to remain. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Retterman?
Good to see you, Jack.
Hello, my name's Jack Ratterman. I live at 568 East Hall Road, North Merritt Island, and I'm president of the North Merritt Island Homeowners Association. Last night we had our monthly meeting, and there was a unanimous vote in support of the Special District Board. This board looks out for the interests of North Merritt Island. Again, we're all volunteers. The cost to the community is zero, as far as I know. We abide by the same rules that you do with the Sunshine Law, and the people that are on the board are very dedicated. When there's an issue before the board, is at least 3 or 4 of the members will visit the location that's under discussion. So all the properties on North Merritt Island, we try to do the best for the community. We have no private interest in it at all. And if you're for transparency, then this is what you're looking for to keep this board. Thank you.
Commissioner Lober?
Okay, so I bet folks are wondering where I'm at with this one. I've gotten a lot of outreach from constituents on this particular issue, and with no exceptions that come to mind, everyone has been opposed to dissolving the dependent special district. So I can tell you, based on what I've heard here, it's consistent with what I've heard in the past from my constituents. Merritt Island is kind of unique in the sense that it's a big unincorporated area. It's not just big geographically, it's big in terms of population. I can tell you, obviously, you all have me, you have Myra, and then you have the Dependent Special District. What I will say is, given that it's been absolutely unanimous, or as close to that, it essentially seems that way to me, I would be opposed to anything that would result in getting rid of that district. So from my perspective, I certainly hope this doesn't pass. I don't know as much about Port St. John. I don't know if they have different cost structures than what we've got. But given that the goal, although it's a noble one, I don't know that that goal overrides the concerns of my constituents. And whether I personally like or dislike the idea of having the district, given that it's absolutely overwhelmingly to the extent of being essentially universal in favor of keeping this, I don't think that I have much of a choice in it but to respect the will of my constituents and go along with what they want me to do in this case. So that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I'm in the same place with Port St. John. They're a great group of people. I hear from 3 out of 4 of these probably twice a month. And great group of people. They are out in the community, and they're really doing a good service. It's a large area, large population, and this is probably one that I'm going to, well, it is one that I'm going to vote to keep also.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking for direction. I was not looking, obviously sunshine precludes. I do want to make one comment. 25 years ago when then County Commissioner Scott Ellis was up here and said, these boards, paraphrasing, but will never go away, despite the fact that there's a sunshine clause in them. I'd like to say he was very prophetic 25 years ago, and when he voted against these, he certainly knew what the heck he was talking about. So I've done my due diligence not once but twice to try to shrink the size of government. And just as a note for just a point, and I'm not going to belabor the fact again, unless there is a change in the board here any given time, that the residents of North Merritt Island are very well represented by the commissioner that sits to my right, as they were with the commissioner that sat to my right prior to Commissioner Lober, and they have the exact same rights as everyone else when it comes to showing up for the planning and zoning, and as well as showing up for the boards as you currently hear. You guys are absolutely unique, as is every community in Brevard County. And I'm afraid that 25 years from now, we will have other dependent districts as we move forward. When someone says Palm Bay is unique or Satellite Beach is unique. And I promise to do my best to make government decrease in size, not increase the size of government. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you guys voted to not dissolve your board and unanimous support of yourselves. That is a noble vote, a great job. And with that, I thank the board for allowing me to get the concerns. It's very clear that there is no support up here to shrink government today. Thank you.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah. Just a little note on that. I know when they probably put that in, Port St. John had a decent size, but it's grown to a city. It's quite a large area. They're not incorporated. And again, my concern is up in District 1, we have one incorporated area, and that's Titusville, and we have 44% of the unincorporated area of Brevard County in District 1. Ergo, I have all these people as a community, and it's so beneficial, especially what we're trying to do, is when they come together and help give us ideas of what the community is looking at. And when I've got these groups, and maybe we should make this so that it doesn't sunset, because Port St. John's going to be around, and I don't want them to incorporate. I'd rather keep them as a county area. So they're doing a service. They're helping us out tremendously with costs because they're doing a lot of the legwork for us. They go to P&Z and state their case. And maybe some of if the city would have lost, the area would have lost population, I could see it might need to go away. But this is actually working like a city. I think like the Merritt Island area is too. Mr. Lober, you almost act like you almost have to be the mayor of your area. And I think when we get help with citizen participation helping us, I think it's very vital.
Commissioner Lober?
I think it's a great goal to limit the size of government, but another goal that competes with it in this case is having access to government. And in my mind, having access to government is the winner of a contest between the two. And it's a lot easier, and it's not just my assumption. I've had constituents tell me, I think I have at least one in writing if someone wants to do a public records request. I've had constituents tell me point blank that it's much easier for them to stay in North Merritt Island to essentially get their voice heard by the county commission than to go to various different P&Z meetings and before the commission itself. And if that's what it takes to allow people to access the government and have their voice heard, I'm in favor of it. I can tell you in terms of a concern of there being numerous other special districts popping up, I don't plan on proposing any. There would have to be some incredible circumstances for me to propose a new special district. And if someone else proposes one, there'd have to be incredible circumstances for me to support one. But all I can tell you is we have something that has a very clear set of benefits to my constituents. My constituents are beyond overwhelmingly in favor of it. And I think in terms of limiting government, let's say, just for hypothetical sake, I say, all right, let's go ahead and dissolve the special district, and let's, no offense, don't have a heart attack, Larry, I'm not going to do this to you, but let's say we say we're going to go ahead and dissolve Myra as well to limit the size of government. Now, what do you think Merritt Island is going to do if that happens? I'm guessing they're going to incorporate, and we're going to be paying people to essentially perform the exact same functions that the county is now performing, but with an additional layer of bureaucracy. So in trying to shrink government, all we will have done in the end is potentially expand it to a tremendous extent. So my thought is, if they've got me, they've got Myra, and they have the dependent special district, and that's all they've got because there is no municipality, especially given that the dependent special district costs us a negligible amount of money to keep going, I don't see a case for dissolving them by any means. So I respect the goal, but I just think that it's like a chess game where you've got to look a couple moves down the road. If we do that, what do you think they're going to do? They're not just going to sit there. It's going to cost them and it's going to cost the county a lot of money if they start looking at incorporating and adding potentially a police department and fire rescue and looking at potentially taking over caring for the roads and maintaining the roads. It's horrifying to me to think of what the cost to Merritt Island would be and what the cost to the county would be were they to incorporate. And I believe if they have the feeling that the county as a whole doesn't care about them and doesn't want them to have the minimal representation that they have apart from the District 2 office, I don't have any good arguments for them at that point not to incorporate.
Commissioner Smith?
Commissioner Tobias, how much do these two special districts cost the county in a course of a year?
Thank you. I looked at it from the red tape perspective as someone that was looking at developing. What this does is set it back an extra level that if they decide to build in one of these areas, this requires them to go to a unique board that is a third level that they have to go to. I think transparency is absolutely ridiculous, as everyone has the exact same opportunity to come to planning and zoning, as well as the board, as you can see here today. So it is an added level to those individuals that create jobs and those that pay impact fees. And again, this was meant to sunset. It was written in there, and I just would go with the will of the people that decided this was the best idea for it to end at some period of time. But again, clearly, that was not advice given by then Commissioner Scott Ellis that this would never end was absolutely correct. So the cost to the taxpayers has to be borne by the amount of time that individuals who want to provide, again, jobs and tax revenue is impacted, not just the direct dollars to the county.
So it costs nothing. So if we shrink this, we're not shrinking government any. There's no cost. So, and as far as the fact that it was supposed to sunset, well, evidently there are more than a few boards before this one that didn't agree with Scott Ellis. So just mark this board as one more that doesn't agree with Scott Ellis on this particular issue. So I'd like to call a question. If there's no second, let's move on.
Well,
There's no motion.
Okay, well then,
well, and I'd like to
Let's
have
move on.
my
Oh,
2
I'm
cents
sorry.
too. And I appreciate Commissioner Lober looking out for his district as he should do. While I agree that it's important that you have representation out there, I think the idea that there's so overkill with the representation out there, I think, and this is a separate issue altogether, and you'll probably not enjoy me saying this, but Merritt Island should have incorporated a long time ago, in my opinion. So I think, the North Merritt Island Homeowners Association, the special district, I think again, and I agree with Commissioner Tobias, which is surprising because it hasn't been the case here lately, but and it's not just about shrinking government, it's about the amount of hoops people have to jump through, but the amount of just overkill with oversight. I mean, and to say that staff has no involvement would not be true. I'm sure staff has to put those reports together as well, and it gets part of our agenda. And I think Port St. John may be a little bit different of a circumstance. I think, a board 10 years from now is going to say, I still can't believe Merritt Island isn't incorporated, because I think you don't get services because you're not, and you aren't able to do the things that you want to do. So while I agree that part of our area is Merritt Island as a county, that's a commission's job. And I'm not saying I don't want to hear from people, and I think homeowners associations are a great thing, but dependent special districts, and I have to agree, once you make them, and we have a workshop coming up on boards that have just sort of been in place for years and have never gone away just for this purpose. So, I agree with Commissioner Tobias, which I don't think that Commissioner Tobias got his 3 votes to move forward on this, but I mean, I agree with at least looking at Merritt Island, but I think Port St. John is a little different, because I don't think you have quite the number of boards that Merritt Island has.
They're working on a small area study too, so they're
Right.
starting to figure
So-
themselves out.
Okay, so I don't think, are you going to make a motion in any way?
I was just looking for board direction on this one. I didn't want to put anyone in a rough
I didn't know if
spot.
you were going to make motion to move forward on
With
anything.
with only 2 votes, I don't think that's probably
Okay.
a wise direction
All
to go.
right, just didn't want to not hear from you. Okay. Item number 6.
Good evening. This is a legislative intent and permission to advertise regarding the tourism tax budget plan to lower the match requirement for tourism funded by Indian River Lagoon grants, and then amend Section 102-119. It's in 2 parts. The first one is a recommendation from the TDC in regards to the IRL grant program that's part of the Beach Committee. It's been a 3-to-1 grant that's written into the ordinance. The TDC is recommending to lower that to try to get more applications that would meet the grant requirements down to 2-to-1. And then the second part is something that was identified by the Attorney's Office, and I agreed, which is the language in the ordinance is it's got a 24-month time limit in there. We'd recommend taking that out and just leaving it open, because if there were ever any need to change the allocation, we'd certainly come before the board to vote on that. We're not making any recommendations at this time to do that. So we would recommend taking out that language. And then there's a lot of old numbers in there. I don't know how far back the ordinance goes, but it looks like quite a few years, because the numbers in there don't match up with where we are today. So most other counties, I think, in the research they looked at did not have actual numbers in there regarding the tax collection by percentage. So we would just recommend striking those.
Commissioner Lober?
I just want to say, since I represent the County Commission on the TDC, this was an item that was relatively hot button, but it essentially, as Peter has suggested, the reason for lowering it from 3-to-1 to a lower number is simply because there are municipalities that are out there that do not have the ability to meet that 3-to-1. So it's not that we're essentially giving them more or requiring less from them. It's that we're looking to do this to enable projects that would never otherwise take place. With respect to this, I would point out this is simply advertising it, and if there is some question, I would say let's go forward with advertising it. We can have someone from each side of the discussion come and present when this comes back for a hearing. But there certainly were a couple people that were opposed to it on the TDC, and then there were many people that were in favor of it. But again, just keep in mind this is solely to advertise, so I would support this.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I think I'm good with it, too. Actually, that's the one I listened to. And even though they weren't, I think you ended up getting all member votes on it. I think everybody voted it through.
I don't remember if it was unanimous, but it certainly was overwhelmingly in favor.
Okay, so I think it's good. I listened to your conversation. It made a lot of sense, so.
And in actuality, all these municipalities contribute to that lagoon tax as well, everybody that lives within them, so they might as well reap the benefits of projects for their areas, so I'd be supporting it too. All right. Do you have a motion?
Move to approve?
Motion by Commissioner Lober,
Second.
second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, item 7, J7.
Okay, so I wanted to use the opportunity to continue the discussion of the TDC. First, just to have the opportunity in sunshine here to see if anyone's had any ability to look at potentially securing waivers or putting together waiver requests for their TDC appointees. I think it's something that unfortunately needs to be handled sooner rather than later. The longer this is something that drags out, I think the worse potential result we may have for those folks that are serving on the TDC. There's been a lot of discussion back and forth between my office and the county attorney's office over some of the code that pertains to the TDC. My concern, as I mentioned at the last meeting, was to get this particular advisory committee up to par in the sense that it's operating according to state statute. One of the items that came to my attention by way of the county attorney's office in looking to do that is that we have a kind of a gaping absence of a provision for addressing how to remove members were the need to arise to remove a member from the TDC. And essentially, my view, taking off the commissioner hat for a moment and putting the attorney hat on for the moment, or even the adjunct professor hat on for the moment, is by and large in this country and in this state, you can do more or less whatever you want to unless there's a law prohibiting that particular action. And I invite our county attorney to jump in as well if she has a difference of opinion on this. But that's, one of the great things about living in America and one of the great things about living in Florida. You can do what you want unless it's prohibited. That said, my understanding and my read, and I believe the county attorney, and I'll ask her if she agrees as well, essentially now, without there being anything addressing removal of someone, a TDC appointee specifically, in the code, my read of that would be it would simply require a majority vote by the county commission, and it could be with or without cause. But the concern is, it troubles me that we have an absence of that particular information in the code. I think it's cleaner by all measures to have that in the code, and I'm not going to ask tonight to remove anyone. Obviously, I don't want to see Laura Lee go, and I know she's sitting there, so I'll put her mind at ease. I don't have any plans to ask to have you removed now or at any point in the future. If one of us goes nuts, then maybe things will be different, but I would like to ask that we consider waiving legislative intent, given that this is something which could cause us problems, and go straight to advertising an ordinance that would effectively codify terms of removal for TDC appointees, such that an appointee can be removed with or without cause by a majority vote of the county commission, which, as I understand it, is consistent with the county attorney's opinion of what the policy would be now if you were to ask for her best estimate as to what the policy would be. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
So I'm not looking at changing anything. I'm looking at formalizing that and codifying that. Also, I think to help us out, because this is another area of ambiguity that could happen for a variety of reasons, not simply due to removing someone, but if someone resigns or someone, God forbid, drops dead or gets terminally ill, we need to specify in that as well, or I would suggest that we specify as well, and this is part of the motion, that any vacancies that are filled will not restart the clock for that appointee, such that the appointee in filling a vacancy would only serve out the remainder of the term for that vacancy. So whatever the duration of term remaining would be for that position, whether it's due to removal or someone quitting or someone dying or otherwise being unable to serve. And then lastly, since we did previously address term limits for the TDC, I'd ask that we also treat any partial term served in a manner that doesn't impact and doesn't count toward a term limit, so that it's not impacted in terms of the maximum term of service. And I wouldn't ordinarily ask to waive legislative intent. I think this is the first time I've done that. But my concern is we could have some real problems and have a potential argument from someone looking at essentially grasping at straws to stay on. And we really need to have a mechanism by which to deal with major issues that come up that would necessitate and warrant removing a particular member. But again, I'm not asking to remove anyone, but I am going to make the motion to advertise that legislative intent to essentially codify what the county attorney's impression and my impression as well is with respect to removing folks, with the two caveats that I added about the vacancies being filled, not restarting the clock, and then also that not counting toward a term limit. So essentially filling a vacancy won't count for or against you in determining how long someone's been on the TDC.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Question, Ms. Bentley, if we did this, would this be inclusive of all boards? Because we've had this discussion up here before. Like a new commissioner got on, somebody had already appointed them, so we're...
You have two different places where you could put this language. You could put the language in the TDC code, which is section 102, or you could go to chapter 2 and have it apply to all advisory bodies. You have a uniform advisory code section, that's chapter 2. So it could go in either place, really.
Okay, so, because I know we had a conversation before, and I know we were getting ready to have a workshop on it, about the fairness of an exiting commissioner throwing someone on a board and it doesn't give the new commissioner an opportunity. So we could do that if we did this, and they would be able to bring some type of remedy to that. So it would open up the ability to the new commissioner. I know I'm rambling now. Okay, but that was my question.
That makes sense. That would take care of both of those problems.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lober?
I would just say, obviously, the wording would have to be worked out, but essentially, if it's not otherwise specified, then we could default to that. I wasn't looking at doing something that broad with this, but if that's the mood of the commission, I'm happy to support that as well, and I'm happy to modify the motion accordingly. Obviously, the items that pertain specifically to TDC, well, I guess we could basically make everything generic and say that with respect to any term limits which may or may not be applicable, filling a vacancy shall not count toward or against that.
I think we can include that language. We have the same absence of language about terms and what happens with a resignation or vacancy for a number of the advisory boards, so that could be helpful in that instance as well.
Yeah, if you don't have any concerns, I'm happy to modify the motion essentially to make it generic to anything where there's nothing in conflict with what we're proposing at this point, but otherwise maintaining it the same.
I think we can manage that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and modify the motion.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Okay, just erring on the side of things I've heard Commissioner Isnardi and Tobias say in the past, because they've always been wanting to flow with due process. What are y'all's thoughts on that, of not just doing the regular process and doing what we typically do to do this? I'm trying to figure, I know we did that with that one board because we had a problem with them perhaps doing something they shouldn't have been doing. So what are y'all's thoughts on that? I'm just kind of weighing it, but I'd like to hear from all of you.
Commissioner Lober?
Smith, so.
Well, just to jump in on that topic, the reason this to me seemed appropriate to ask to waive our typical policy, and I've not done it before, as I mentioned, is because we could have a tremendous black eye and have a delay in our ability to react to it. I'll give you perhaps an extreme example, but if we have someone go absolutely nuts and kill someone or kill a series of people, they may still be sitting on the TDC board as our appointees while we're trying to work through this process. So I don't think anyone's going to go, buy an axe or, anything like that and go crazy that's serving on the TDC. But we could have someone do something profound, either illegal or totally immoral, to the point that we all object and we want to get rid of them. But we would potentially have a greater susceptibility to an argument that there was some vagueness or some ambiguity in that this wasn't addressed. So I just see this as a glaring omission which we need to address a little bit quicker in an abundance of caution. I mean, God willing, if nothing happens, there's no advantage in doing this now, but I'm just concerned that we can't count on everything working out the rosiest possible way that it could. And I don't know that anything crazy is going to happen between now and the next couple months. But I am concerned that if something happens, if let's say there's someone that gets horrible media coverage due to some misfeasance or malfeasance on their part, either with the TDC or with their own business entity or entities, now we're in a bad spot. So I do think there's a sense of urgency that might not otherwise be there.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Ms. Bentley. Taking Commissioner Lober's scenario, if someone committed a felony and this was not to go through, does the board or anyone have the ability to remove a member of the TDC for cause? Because I think, murder, as he mentioned, probably would be cause. Would that require...
Serial murder.
A serial murder, I'm sorry.
At the beginning...
I had to laugh now.
At the very beginning of Commissioner Lober's discussion, he mentioned that the ordinance is silent as to removal. There are no provisions about removal in your code. Given the absence of language, I would say that you have the ability to remove people at this time. This would simply codify the process and make it very clear what would happen with the terms and the procedure for doing so. For example, with Myra, there is a removal for cause procedure, and it has a notice period. So you can do things like that if you codify it. It's a board decision.
So, bounce to Commissioner Lober. So are you concerned that someone on the board, TDC board, would do something so egregious that would require, assuming this didn't immediately go through or didn't go through in the time manner that you're trying to facilitate this, that they would commit that serial murder, we would vote to remove them off, and then they would come back and potentially have some cause of action against us for removing them for cause because it's silent and we did not have had yet codify that?
No, I think you can in the absence of language. It's just, it's not a clear procedure how you do it. You have to create the procedure for doing it, that's all. And you don't have to create a code to do that. It's just silent, you could proceed.
So apparently we can. So my issue is help me because I don't disagree with, I think, the premise here, but I don't have anything. This was pretty much when I was in the legislature, there was something called a shell bill. And what you've presented us is a shell bill. And it's pretty substantive. So it sounds like I agree with the premise you're going for, except I just haven't seen it. And the good news, it doesn't sound like it's going to cost taxpayers any money. So right. I'll take that off. But explain to me, because there would be one more hearing if we waived. And listen, I'm not opposed to waiving the advertisement altogether, right? Because that's just something the board set up. We can waive that altogether for everyone. However, explain to me why in this circumstance. I understand why Commissioner Zanardi, she explained extremely well when it came to the CSC why we needed to go forward with that. But if this one, we have the right to remove someone for cause right now, what situation, you mentioned serial murder, it sounds like that's not, explain a real life one or an ability that why we have to shorten this by a 2-week period.
Let's say we find out that there is and this is entirely hypothetical at this point, I'm not daring to accuse anyone of doing anything like this, but let's say we have information that comes up that says an appointee is giving kickbacks or is found to have given kickbacks to a prior county employee in order to drive room nights at his or her hotel. That would be a problem. If that ends up getting covered in the news and that's something that comes up, I would be very concerned. Now, do I think that that's likely to come up in the next day? I don't think so. Do I think that that's something, something along those lines, not necessarily that particular hypothetical, but I don't know what I don't know, and it concerns me. And the whole reason to do this, and all the more so the whole reason to do this in an expeditious fashion, is to put us on the best possible footing. I agree with our county attorney 100% in everything she said thus far, certainly with respect to this item. I think this is not giving us, I know this is not giving us any additional rights that we otherwise don't already have, but it's codifying them to keep it clean and to keep everything on the up and up. And in an abundance of caution, it's always better to have a clear process. All we're doing is codifying the process which already exists. So that's how I see it different from taking some massive step that's changing some fundamental aspect of county governance. So I understand where you're coming from, but I don't know what I don't know. So to ask me for a hypothetical, I could come up with several. If we have, for instance, someone that starts bad-mouthing everyone else that's on the TDC, and it gets run, and they're essentially toxic to the TDC, to the point that we're in a bad spot and it's causing a black eye for the county, that's possible. I don't know what people are going to do. You're dealing with not one individual, you're dealing not with two individuals, you're dealing with a number of individuals, all of whom have their unique life experiences and circumstances. God forbid someone's wife could leave them or husband could leave them and they could go off the deep end and do something. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go commit serial murder, but I can't play psychologist in addition to attorney and commissioner in figuring out what may or may not happen, but I am concerned that there is a glaring omission in that we don't have it addressed. And I do agree we could deal with it, but rather than dealing with it in the way that currently is available, I'd rather deal with it with the same options available to us in a cleaner fashion that essentially keeps us above board all the more so.
Commissioner Smith?
I would just like to say I haven't heard anything this evening that would cause me to think that we have to fast-track this and bypass normal procedure.
Mr. Abate?
I just want to indicate that a week from Thursday, we are going to have a workshop at 1 o'clock where we will be bringing board policies that relate to 60-plus advisory committees. And I think we have 3. I was working on it actually today with staff on the PowerPoint to give the board the overview of a variety of items that relate to advisory committees. And there are different ordinances currently in play. I believe there's at least 2 or 3 that may be applicable, and Eden mentioned one of them. So, if you're narrowly looking with there, we will be bringing, and I will tell you now that one of the things when we give you that overview a week from Thursday, we're going to be asking where the board would like different direction from where we are now. So hopefully you'll all be able to bring those packages we gave you on the 60-plus advisory committees, and then we'll give you just an overview of what we did, and you're getting a preview now, and what's currently applicable, and then we'll have the opportunity for the public comment and board discussion in terms of things that you want to change. So there may be a variety of issues on a global basis that you want. I know you're focused on one right now, but I just wanted to indicate that that's coming up, and I just want to make sure I had the opportunity to remind you that that was going to happen.
If it makes people more comfortable, I'm happy to narrow it back again to just the TDC, but I'm just concerned. It's the same reason people buy insurance. They hope they never need it. But when they do, it's really nice to have it. And I think this is something where it would be very nice to have this in place were the need to arise. Could we get by without it? Sure, we could get by without it. But I do think that this is a significant omission, and it's significant enough that it is worth fast-tracking. But if folks disagree, I respect that as well.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I actually would like to do this for all the boards. I think there's something, I'm glad you came up with the idea, but I wouldn't mind if you wouldn't mind if we would just go ahead and follow the process, just because I've been waiting to hear what you're going to bring on this, because there hasn't been anything in it, but that would give us a little bit of time to get all the phone calls, which I know we're about to get. Not that I don't, trust your opinion, but that way we can kind of figure this out, of what it is we're looking at and figure it out. And I think it's just something I'd be more comfortable with if you're okay with that.
Go ahead.
Maybe just a question, and I don't know if I should direct this to Ms. Bentley or Mr. Abate, but if we put this off to the workshop that Mr. Abate had just identified, would we still be able to bring this back at the end of the month at any of the meetings to be able to resolve, or would that put us back into June at this point if we don't waive that first hearing?
It would actually bring us into July.
July.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my concern. But for that, I'd be happy to push it back if we're talking a week or two, but now we're talking about
We'll just bring
many
it up at
weeks.
the workshop, and we can make a better decision then?
Well, the problem is, I think
Thursday?
if we do it on that date, we wouldn't be able to get this finalized before we're out for the month. So that, it's not like a week or two, in which case I'd be happy to put it off and not fuss. So I'm going to maintain the motion as it is, but if it dies for lack of a second, it dies for lack of a second.
I mean, I would second for further discussion, but I don't think you have the support. So, I mean, I like the idea of codifying it, but that's probably where I would stop. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I think when you add a few more rules to it, that's probably stuff that could be addressed at the workshop. I don't have a problem with that. If we have the ability to do it now, I don't see what the harm would be. And if it's that important to you, I don't see what the harm would be in making that legal opinion more solid, I guess. Commissioner Tobias?
Since this is an ordinance, it would come back. We would have one more opportunity. It's very easy always to vote for something for legislative intent because many times we haven't, we don't necessarily have it in writing. So, but since this is an ordinance and something that would come back, and, I'm going to take Commissioner Lober at his word and say that this is just an insurance policy and he's not targeting anyone on the TDC.
Sorry, Laura Lee.
I would, I would second this for fast tracking it and going to foregoing the notice.
And see, and I like the idea of legislative intent, but again, and I think we've already discussed this, and Ms. Bentley could even talk about the history of what legislative intent was, because when you put something on the agenda, it should be complete, and that information should be available to the public for several days before a meeting, at least probably over a week or more. But the legislative intent was because staff was getting inundated with bizarre requests, with overwhelming requests, so staff was putting in hours and days of research on items that didn't have a chance of going anywhere, or no movement would ever be made during commission meetings. So legislative intent isn't solely for public notice, but it's basically to make sure there's order, make sure there's the desire of the board to hear the items. So that's why I'm okay to waive legislative intent, because I believe that you're giving plenty of public notice, if that makes sense.
May I make one comment?
Sure.
And I know this is one of those things I'd advise my clients never to do. I should probably shut up when I have the 3 votes. But I want to clarify a concern that Commissioner Tobias brought up earlier in terms of essentially, what was the term you used, the shell bill, or?
Yes,
The shell bill. And Attorney Bentley can jump in if her recollection is different than mine, but essentially we had discussed a lot of different items pertaining to TDC membership. And I don't believe it was until a couple days ago, it was certainly this week, that we had finalized the direction that we wanted to go with this. So my intention in putting this on the agenda was to preserve our ability to discuss it. But just as I mentioned before, there's certain things which we have knowledge of timely enough that we can get on the advanced agenda. There's certain things which come up that have to be add-ons, and there's certain things which can't be. Rather than having this come up in a board report, which I thought was ill-advised or ill-advisable, where essentially people have no idea what I'm going to be talking about, I'd give as much specificity as I could, but I didn't have a final answer in terms of from the county attorney's office, and that's not due to any wrongdoing or slacking on Ms. Bentley's part, but we just had been going back and forth so many times that I think it was it 2 days ago that we had essentially firmed up? I think it was certainly this week, the direction that I intended to go on this. So it's not something where I'm trying to sneak something in or do anything like that, but I appreciate the support.
And just so I'm clear, this is just for the TDC, correct?
If you'd like me to limit it and essentially leave it that way, I'm happy to limit it that way. And if your second still stands, I'd appreciate that.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I really think we need to get something in place to where we can remove people that have been on boards. I do. My concern with this right now is, I listened to the meeting, you got a few cranky ones, but that wouldn't be enough to remove them, from where I'm thinking. So I really don't understand this. There's something that we don't know, whether it's something going on or not, but I mean, I think we should have that information if we're going to break policy to do something, because what if there is nothing? We're sending out a message right now to board members. I don't know. I think it's too ambiguous, and not that if we had the information we might not do something different, but I think clearly if someone on our board is breaking the law, I think it's going to kind of remedy themselves. But so this is just my concern, the message that we might be sending out to board members, that there's a few craggy ones I wouldn't mind considering myself, but I don't know if it's enough for me to remove off. But on this, I'm not real sure, because I'm dealing with just hit and miss information right now. Not that I really think we need to do this for all the boards. I just do. I think we should have that ability. But if we're already protected, if you have to remove someone who's doing something illegal, I don't know why we couldn't just follow a process. When Commissioner Isnardi brought that up, I mean, we had a definite situation where we would have gotten a lot of trouble with that situation. But I think right now, just having the discussions, the first time we kind of brought out the information. So I think in all fairness to the board members, I think it might be something that maybe we should, I don't know, wish we could talk off of line so we could figure it out. But I have no idea why we're voting on this right now so quickly. That's my concern.
Go ahead.
No, and again, I wish I could provide you information, but the information I think that you're looking for is information which I really may not have. Again, I don't want to risk it going too circular in my comments, but it's simply I'm looking to codify the mechanism we have in place. I would understand your equivocation or your concern more so if I was either expanding or limiting some function that we otherwise would have, or expanding or limiting our ability to act in a certain fashion. But all I'm doing is essentially trying to put in code the policy which our county attorney already believes is in place. So were we to change something, then certainly I would see there being a benefit in advertising this potentially more so, or as much as possible. But we're not changing anything. We're simply cleaning things up by including essentially our county attorneys, which also happens to be my opinion with respect to the current state of the law insofar as it applies to this board. So I agree with you. It would be great to have this with all of the boards, but if, again, since I'm on TDC, my concern pertains to TDC, just as my concern at the last meeting was with respect to my TDC appointee. I'm open to doing this with all the boards, but my particular concern is with TDC at this point, because that's the board that I'm serving on where I see the glaring absence. So, I respect it if you can't support it, and I'm not one to take it personally. But I just, I am worried that, God forbid there's an issue, hopefully, and I think statistically, none of us are likely to get into car accidents when we leave here. But if one of us does, it's nice when we have insurance. So, the cleaner and the easier it is for us having the process in place and in writing, the better.
And I'm more inclined to support it if it does apply to all the boards, because I think by centering out one board, it's almost saying that even though the rule is assumed, that we can remove, I think it's more fair if we do it that way. And I think it not only holds the member accountable if someone does want to remove somebody that's on the board, it actually makes it more public if you think about it. I mean, because if the rule's not in place now, and say I wanted to remove somebody that was appointed before I got on commission or whatever, I could do it very quietly. And this way, it actually makes us bring it back to the board to ask or to look for support for removing. And it makes you justify doing it. So I don't think we should remove people just because we don't like them or we don't like what they have to say. But if they're becoming a problem on the board, or if they're not showing up to meetings and there's no, rules on attendance or whatever, I think that's important. Or if you have a better representative that's more of an expert in the field. But I think in order to be fair, it should apply to all the boards. I'm okay with the public notice only because there will be public notice. I would just ask that you have your materials together in the time for the publication for the agenda.
Okay.
And again, if we were meeting in June, maybe I would be okay, but we're not. And so I think as long as we have the agenda item in place, I think public will have enough time for the notice.
The ad will have to be to Florida Today by tomorrow at noon in order to make the 21st agenda. So we will have to work very quickly.
Is that the agenda that we're shooting for?
As long as it's done this month, I'm happy to go. If it needs to be a zoning meeting, we can kick it back a couple extra days to give you breathing room if the board's okay with that. I'm not worried about a day or two. I'm worried about having a month-plus long gap.
If the board's okay with this ordinance on the zoning meeting, we would very much like to have that fallback position in case we don't make our target date, but we don't normally put
It would be better
ordinances
if
on
it
the
is,
zoning.
because I'm not going to be at the meeting on the 21st.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Which I was going to express during the board reports too, but.
May I ask
So
one question?
I don't know if you're looking at modifying your ordinance, but I would prefer, you want to see if you have your second first?
Exactly, yeah. If I'd still maintain Commissioner Tobias' support, I'm happy to
For it to apply
phrase
to
it
all boards?
such that it applies to all boards.
Yeah, I was more comfortable with just the TDC, in all honesty.
You're kind of centering them out.
I wanted to tackle the boards, but, again, this is for legislative intent, or not legislative intent, but we still get one more crack
Right.
at this. So my second will hold either way.
Okay, I'll defer. Which would you prefer that I do?
I would prefer it to be fair across all boards.
Okay, then that's the motion.
And then if anybody doesn't like it, like whatever you bring, then we'll just vote against it then.
Perfect.
Makes sense, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh, we've got some more. We got Mr. Vate. Oh, you talked?
That was the issue.
Commissioner
What date
Pritchett?
were we bringing it?
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and throw this out there. I would prefer all boards. I'm going to support this when it comes back. I'm going to vote no on this just because I would rather not be in a hurry. But just so you know, I do support the idea of it. I think it's a good idea. But I've learned in my life whenever I do anything without having information or it's a crisis to me, I usually make bad decisions. So that's why I'm going to not support that just because of the time frame, but when it comes back, I'll be supporting
I
it.
respect that.
Thank you, sir.
See, and I'm most comfortable supporting this because it's non-binding. Well, what we're doing now is just saying you can bring it back, and then we'll decide then on how to vote for it. So I get what you're saying, but I'm okay more now with supporting it now and then making a more informed decision when you bring the item back completely.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2. All right. Public comments. I have no public comment cards. Board reports. Mr. Abate.
I have no report.
Ms. Bentley?
No report.
Ms. Pritchett?
No report?
Mr. Lober?
Just want to thank Tad Calkins. I don't know is he still here? Did we lose him?
He left. He ran for his life.
I know Commissioner Tobias had some thanks. I believe it was Commissioner Tobias right earlier in the meeting. Well, I want to thank him as well. I had a fundraiser for the Merritt Island Volunteer Fire Department on Sunday, this past Sunday, and he was kind enough to come out because I had it as well as an open house for District 2. And it was brought to my attention that there might be some folks that had some questions pertaining to board action which took place prior to my time on the board. So he was an invaluable resource, and he certainly did have an opportunity, and I'm happy that he was there to be able to address folks and some of the questions they had, which were beyond my range of knowledge. So my thanks to him and to the planning and development folks.
Mr. Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one quick board report. It's somebody's birthday today. He's a beer aficionado. He's an amateur astronomer. He's a Game of Thrones fan. He's a legal scholar. He's an all-around great guy. And the fact that he is here at 7:57 tonight speaks to he may need some mental counseling on this one. Billy Prasad, thank you for all your hard work,
Happy
especially on your
birthday,
birthday.
John said he's going to sing for you.
Yeah, not bloody likely, but thank you so much for all you do, especially on your birthday. I greatly appreciate it.
That's great. Happy birthday to you. Commissioner Smith?
No report.
And my report is, I'm not going to be here on the 21st. I mean, I'm going to try to call in, so it looks like you're going to have to hold the reins for that meeting. My son is graduating
Congratulations.
for Army aviation training, and so I wouldn't miss that unless, something else bigger was happening, but there's not much things bigger than that. So I may be on the road and driving, depending on whether or not I'll be able to phone in. If I'm actually physically doing the driving myself, I don't think I'll be a very productive, active, helpful member of the board. But if I am not driving in the car physically myself, then I'll definitely call in to the meeting. But I'll let you guys know a couple of days in advance. We just ask that you support Mr. Lober as we're throwing him in the deep end. Because I don't think people realize all what goes on up here. When we get a little disorganized, it's almost expected because there's a clock, there's the buttons, everybody wants to talk, and then you have an agenda to follow. So it can get a little bit nerving. But anyhow, I just wanted to let the board know that. And also, too, I'm sitting as part of the Space Summit, which is supposed to be pretty exciting in Orlando, and I'll let you guys know how that goes. I think everybody got an invite, but I'm part of the panel.
Great.
So wish me luck, wish my nerves luck, and pray that I represent Brevard County well. And I'll let you know how my DC trip goes. The DC should be fun. We're meeting with the Secretary of the Air Force, which is pretty exciting and pretty awesome.
Thank you for going.
So I'll let you guys know how that goes and keep you abreast on everything. And that's all I have. You have your light on?
Yeah, just real briefly.
Of
Just-
course.
Just as a heads up, this truly is brief.
Real brief, if I had a nickel.
So since I'm going to be parked over in your seat at the next go-around, or at the meeting you identified, I have asked Mr. Abate to place himself next to front and center right here to keep me out of trouble. So if anyone sees Mr. Abate here, that's at my request, to help make sure that I don't make any sort of catastrophic failure or...
I was going to say, Commissioner Pritchett can help you, too.
Me and Commissioner Tobias to throw
Perfect.
things at you, so.
That's true. And,
Yeah.
you know, I told Mr. Abate, since it was the right knee that had the surgery, and he'll be on my left, he can give me a swift kick without
Please give
injuring
him a
me.
hard time, somebody, please.
It's going to be a short meeting.
Thanks.
You can get most of it on
All
your
right.
phone, yeah.
And with that, nothing
You
else?
can get most of our stuff.
Okay, I'll adjourn.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.